Hello everyone and welcome back to another exciting episode of 8 Dead Giants with me, your host, Ben. I'm all by myself again this week. I really hope that's not going to continue forever, but lining up schedules and making that work can always be a challenging situation. But trust me, I've got a group of people who want to contribute. It's just making that happen. And I'm confident it will. I'm confident it will happen before long. But that's not going to stop me putting out exciting things for you guys to listen to and I hopefully enjoy. So I'm going to give you a quick rundown of what to expect from the Giants in this episode, and then we'll get into it. So in this episode, we're going to talk about some movies, we're going to talk about some TV, and we're going to talk about some sport potentially at the end, and some gaming as well. In the movies, I want to do a couple of reviews. I'm going to say it as reviews with big air quotes because I don't really consider me chatting by myself. I'm not writing this down. I'm not going to score them, but I've seen them recently, so I'm going to talk about Death of a Unicorn, one of the newest films that's come out from A24, and as a production house and company, they certainly put out some, how should we say, interesting things, and this was definitely interesting. And then I've just today come back from seeing the Thunderbolts in the cinema, and I will do, I'll try and do a conversation around that is going to say open to spoilers, but I won't probably go into too much detail, but I will warn when that's going to happen so that people can skip it if they so wish. Beyond that, I'm going to do a bit of a summer movie preview, which is going to look towards some of the movies that are coming out over the summer in theaters and on streaming platforms in roughly release chronological order, but I won't say dates because they'll be different depending if you're listening in the US or the UK, etc. But I'm going to talk about some of the ones that are exciting me particularly. I'm not going to cover every single movie that's coming out, but I will put some links to trailers as well in the show notes so you can take a look for yourself about what's coming up and just share some of my excitement. And then after that, I think I might have a little chat around some TV I've watched. So I've caught up on Cobra Kai and I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the newest episode of Andor. And then in gaming, I'm going to talk about, let's just say, the state of games media right now. And then some of the price increase news that's been happening around the Nintendo Switch 2 and the Xbox stuff. And then, of course, in relation to Donald Trump's amazing tariffs in the US. You can thank for a lot there. So that's the sort of heads up about what we're going to get into today. So let's get straight into the movies. So, films, movies. I saw Death of a Unicorn, starring Paul Rudd, Jenna Ortega, Will Poulter, Tia Leone, and Richard E. Grant. It's a great cast, don't get me wrong. The premise is, well, it's right there in the title and in the trailer. This is about the death of the mystical creature, a unicorn. And the trailer gives it away somewhat. Unicorns aren't so nice in this reality. They're quite monstrous, quite beastly. And this follows Paul Rudd and Jenna Ortega's character, who are a father and daughter, and they are going to meet with Paul Rudd's bosses in their super rich palatial kind of manor to sort of sort out some legal stuff, and on the way they accidentally kill a unicorn, and the film's premise then sort of continues from there around the, how should we say, the best use of this opportunity without trying to spoil it so much. Now this, as you can probably tell, sort of starts off with a darkly comedic kind of approach to the subject matter, which is, I think, its strongest element. It's definitely the most fun when it's going for this comedy bent, where it's going for this sharply written breakdown of, first of all, the father-daughter dynamic, but then also the idea of the super rich and the, everyone else, the 0.0001%ers, and what sort of this opportunity could mean to them when they discover some of the beneficial properties of said unicorn. Suffice it to say, the bad guys get their comeuppance, the good guys do okay, and there's many unicorn activities that ensue through this movie. I really liked the first act. I really liked some of the second act. It did, in my opinion, definitely fall down in the third act, where the reliance on special effects became more and more required, and the budget didn't sort of stand up to that. Performances are fine. I quite like the fact that Paul Rudd is playing a bit against type. He's not necessarily playing the most affable, likable character for some of this, and everyone in this is quite unlikable. Even Jenna Ortega, who is meant to be the sort of voice of the liberal reasoning in this movie, is also quite unlikable in her own approach to that and her own sort of steadfast, unmoving young person belief that, you know, what she thinks is good and right. Unfortunately, some of those subtleties start to get lost, and we get into quite obvious caricature departments with some of that portrayal. It didn't mean I didn't have a good enough time watching this, but compared to some of A24's other output, I thought this was less subtle and definitely a bit more hit you over the head. For example, I saw Hugh Grant and Sophie Thatcher recently in Heretic, which is a horror movie that A24 put out, which is all about this discussion around organized religion and its manipulation of the masses, which I thought was really well done. I think it's a stronger script than maybe film, but that's another point. I don't think this was A24's best output. I'm not a big fan of Jenna Ortega. I feel like she just plays the same character in everything. She's more of a look than an actual actor, unfortunately, in my mind, that she just plays these alternative, wisecracking, kind of standoffish, goth emo girls really well, most famously in obviously Wednesday, which is coming back for a second season on Netflix this year in August. And that's great. And she does that well. And I think as the way in for the viewer into this particular movie, it works well enough. I think standout performance is Richard E. Grant. He's great in everything he does. I really loved Will Poulter as this sort of insufferable, just icky, gross, rich kid who is kind of useless at everything. He's got drug problems, and that plays into some elements of the film quite well. And he's very funny in his approach. Tia Leone as well, always a good actor, always a good performance. And the three of them, Richard E. Grant, Tia Leone and Will Poulter, as the awful rich people perspective, is really well done. I just think I would have liked this to have gone a bit deeper, a bit headier, almost a bit more in the way that Heretic went into that debate around theology. I'd have loved this to go a bit deeper into the debate around the class divide and the divide between people with and without. However, it does turn into a creature feature pretty rapidly. And I suppose that's an attempt at a surprise for the audience. It's trying to maybe think, oh, A24, it's all going to be intellectual and not be as entertaining. Here's the monsters. But to be honest, the monsters aren't that convincing. They're fine. I quite like what they do here with unicorn lore, if you like. But it stops surprising you around halfway through, and then you're just kind of waiting for the epilogue, the conclusion of the story, which feels very inevitable, which feels there's not a lot of twists in here, there's not a lot of surprises, but it's a fun enough diversion, I suppose. And that's my review of Death of a Unicorn. I'd say, it's a recommendation. I wouldn't say rush out and spend your money on it, but once it's on free streaming, it's worth checking out. Really, though, what I'm here to talk about today is Thunderbolts, and I'll do an insert here.
Skip to 2409.
As a warning around the timestamp so that people know what to skip in regards to spoilers, because I talked about spoilers in the last episode. I don't believe you can really spoil a film like this. It's for the most part pretty formulaic. It's based on a comic book series. So therefore, what can I spoil about it? The Thunderbolts have existed as characters in the Marvel Universe for a really long time. The characters that are in this iteration of Thunderbolts, Ghost, US Agent, Yelena's version of the Black Widow, Bucky Barnes, and Taskmaster, and also Bob Reynolds, the Sentry, there you go, that's the first spoiler, have been around for years and years and years. How can I spoil anything that happens here? But there you go, you've had your warning. This is a fantastic addition to the Marvel roster. I had a really good time watching this. It's easily one of the best Marvel movies in a long, long time. I enjoyed Captain America Brave New World that came out earlier this year, though it's been fairly heavily criticized. It was the first Marvel movie to make me care about Sam Wilson as a character. I've always found him pretty boring and uninteresting. But Brave New World actually got me to really get engaged with him, and Anthony Mackie's performance was really strong there. But this blows it out of the water. There's no question. This is Marvel firing on all cylinders again. The problem is that no Marvel movies are ever going to reach probably the pinnacle of Infinity War and Endgame, purely because they were the conclusions to a story that was built over a decade of films. So therefore, anything that comes after that will never have that weight, and we kind of need to move past that. There also seems to be a media bias right now as well, where everybody's decided that we're going to hate Marvel movies going forwards. And it's just, it's lazy, and it's a real shame that these films are not being taken as they come. And I think it was really interesting that obviously I've just talked about one A24 movie in Death of a Unicorn, and Marvel is going to kind of try to hint that this is their A24 style film, which is a bit different and a bit more arty and a bit more coming from the left field. And I actually kind of agree with some of that. This goes places with character. This goes places with discussions around mental health, for example, and what it means to be happy, what it means to be in this universe, kind of a nobody, a two-bit villain, a mercenary character, which is what these Thunderbolts are, and where their self-worth sits within that. There is actually comparatively not a lot of action and quite a lot of character dialogue in this film. They have had the confidence to sit these actors in rooms, quite often just talking about who they are and what it means to be who they are in relation to the universe and each other. And it was compelling, and it was funny, and it was well written, and the banter was really strong. And I think it was a slightly different kind of banter to what we got between, say, Steve and Tony back in the heyday of the Marvel Cinematic Universe in phase 2 and 3. This is easily the strongest it's been since then, and it was compelling, and it was interesting to discover more of the nuances around, for example, Walker's character, US Agent, played by Wyatt Russell, who I think got pretty done dirty in the Falcon and Winter Soldier TV series. I think he wasn't given enough time to really delve into who he was and why he was the way he was, and he got some really good stuff in this movie. Him as well, and I did forget when I did the lineup as well, David Harbour's Red Guardian, who's also very entertaining in this movie. He's playing the same character we saw him play in Black Widow. He's very over the top, very effusive, and always fun to watch. You always get your money's worth with a David Harbour, and he's always worth checking out. I will say, Florence Pugh's performance here as Yelena, especially connected with the Sentry, with Bob's character, was really touching and heartfelt and really sweet. And there's like a potential sort of romancy vibe that might happen there, which I think would really strengthen those characters, and it gave a real humanity to the performances. I really enjoyed watching their on-screen chemistry. They're not the kind of coupling you'd expect, but it worked really well. I had a lot of standouts from this. I even thought that Ghost came across well. Don't ask me to actually tell you her character's name, because I still couldn't tell you that. She's still not that engaging, but her powers are really cool, and the way she kind of brings that into the fight scenes with the being able to sort of phase through matter, and her, also her kind of interaction with the other characters and her back and forth was also engaging to watch and enjoyable. Everybody did really well, but it's difficult to talk about this movie, I think, without talking about Juliette Louis-Dreyfus as the Countessa de blah 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 de Fontaine. I again, just a mouthful. She, again, a comic book character, but not somebody I've ever particularly latched onto. She's like Nick Fury light in my mind, and nobody's Nick Fury except Sam Jackson. And for God's sake, bring Sam Jackson back to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He's going to want a lot of money, give it to him. But anyway, Secret Invasion, we pretend that never happened, right? That TV show was the worst thing Marvel's ever produced. But that being the last thing he ever did would be a crime. He needs to come back and be in these films. But anyway, so she had a good bit as her kind of, she's the power behind setting up these things. She's been this force behind the experimentation that's resulted in the creation of the Sentry. And then in some ways, she's the the force that brings the Thunderbolts back, brings them together in the first place, and then kind of galvanizes their mission when she sort of turns against them as well. But I really do want to talk about the Sentry, and this will obviously be the most spoiler heavy part of this discussion. So Bob Reynolds here, the Sentry, the Void, this becomes the big third act thrust in New York City that results in the formation of a brand new team, which I'll talk about right at the very end of this. But basically, if you don't know, the Sentry is this Superman level powered character. But the way Marvel, when they introduced him, I think it was about 15, 20 years ago, they basically said, right, he's going to have an alter ego called the Void, which will offset his power, because otherwise he's so insurmountably sort of just destructive, a power of 1,000 exploding suns is how he's described in the comics. It would be boring to have him just go around be another Superman, because the Marvel universe has always been about more realistic superhero powers, a bit more grounded and a bit more vulnerable. So the Void is this alter ego of his, which is basically a mental health issue where he has a depressive, broken personality, and when the Void takes over, all of his negative emotions, all of his fears and his paranoias and his depressive aspects come out, take control, and is basically his super villain alter ego. And we get to see that in the Thunderbolts, and it's scary and it's dark, but then the final act culminates with this battle inside this sort of void space in the Sentry, for all intents and purposes, in his mind, in which the Thunderbolts sort of have this incredible moment of coming together as a team around Bob, supporting him, loving him, and basically through that enabling him to deal with his own demons, which we get to see in a very physical, visceral manner. And I think that's some A24 kind of inspired stuff in there. This is some pretty mature, grown-up storytelling done through a superhero lens, and they really look at where like Yelena is in terms of her mental health, where Bob is, and what it means to be these people. And I was really blown away with it. There's some really sweet, touching, powerful character moments in this, as well as some inventive action scenes. I will shout out to Bucky's reveal, as it were, when he does join the team, as it were, into the foray, and his action reveal is so cool. He's so badass. Made me think of a certain Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator, actually, and I think that might have been very intentional. There's a lot of badass moments. Yelena's opening moments when she's doing like a mission for Da Fontaine, and the way it's shot with shadows and from above, it looked incredible. It was so arty. It was so cinema of a different type, felt quite 70s. It was really great, and also did some really good work foreshadowing the shadow elements of the Void's power set in the third act. And I think there were some really lovely connections there between that first and third act. I believe that intro was actually done as a reshoot as well. So, typical Marvel style, do a lot of reshoots. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it's when they're trying to hone the movie to tell the story that they particularly want to fit into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We also had a proper end credit sequence here for the first time, I think, in a while, that did a very tight tie-in to what's coming next, with a reveal of the Fantastic Four ship entering the Marvel Cinematic Universe for the first time. And obviously the next big Marvel movie is going to be the Fantastic Four. So look, I really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was really worth going to see. I would say it did a good job of utilizing its real estate on a big screen with big sound. I would say it's interesting that the action, because the character set is so grounded, was nothing more than you'd expect almost from, like, I watched the recent Daredevil shows and, the Captain America movies. The action wasn't so over the top as some of the peak of the Avengers storylines were, because there's no flying characters, for example, and that's actually something that comes up in the first act, which is quite funny. And the characters really understand that they are these kind of like gunfighting brawlers that have nothing really that special about them, and therefore the fight scenes do feel very grounded. So when they do use that device in the third act to go into sort of the mind of the Sentry, that's what gives them the ability to make things a little bit more interesting and a bit more varied. And it was great to see that the movie didn't end in typical Marvel fashion with a big pew pew flying around energy blast battle. It was actually quite a somber, mature ending, and then we get the reveal of what this new team is, which is super cool. And it's basically that these guys started the movie as this disparate team of mercenaries. They were these Thunderbolts as such, but at the end they get rebranded as the New Avengers. Now, the New Avengers series of comics was a series that came out in parallel to the main Avengers book. I'd say about 20 years ago, back when I was really into comic books, and it was a really well written. I believe it was Brian Michael Bendis wrote it, one of the best writers of superheroes and Marvel superheroes of the time, and it was a really good sort of companion Avengers book with a different team makeup. And I just think the idea that these guys are the New Avengers and there's going to be a primary Avengers team that Falcon is putting together, Captain America, Sam Wilson is putting together, which will be kind of in competition with the New Avengers. And that's actually touched on in the post-credit scene as well, where they're like, oh, they're suing us for the brand and who's going to be called the Avengers, and you're going to lose our own legitimacy and our own identity because everybody's obviously going to go with Captain America's Avengers. And that's actually quite similar to what happened in the comics. So I think that's a really cool touch. I like the idea of more than one team. And that will be a cool way for them to deal with the large rosters of superheroes that we're going to see in Doomsday and the other films going forwards post Fantastic Four. So that was a nice touch. I think it might leave people scratching their heads a little bit, but basically the idea is that a Thunderbolts team is meant to be anti-heroes and villains. By the end of this movie, you see these characters saving lives, saving innocents, sacrificing themselves for the greater good willingly. They're not villains anymore. They're not anti-heroes. They are superheroes. They are here to protect the regular people. So therefore they deserve to be considered Avengers. And I thought that was actually a lovely moment for those characters, and it made a lot of sense, and it leaves me really excited to see what comes next. So that was my review of the Thunderbolts there, with some spoilers and some reveals. I would love to have a chance to chat with a co-host about this and really get into the merits of this. Hopefully some of my friends and potential co-hosts will watch this soon, and then we can come back, reconvene, and talk a bit more about the Thunderbolts after that. I think I wouldn't mind us having a little bit of a chat now, before we get into the summer preview, about where superhero films are right now, where the Marvel films are right now. I touched on it earlier, where the idea that people have decided that Marvel's done. But we've also got, and it does come up in my summer preview, a Superman movie this year from DC. And I don't think superhero films are necessarily done and dusted. I think people need to understand that a good film is a good film. And the audience do still show up for these movies, though maybe not like in the numbers they did at the peak of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But I think Disney especially has had to pivot and reconvene their ideas of success when it comes to this output. I really enjoyed Captain America. I really enjoyed Thunderbolts. I thought the year we had off last year, we only had Deadpool and Wolverine. That gap has given us a time to kind of reset our expectations of these films. And I think with Fantastic Four just around the corner, again in the summer movie preview, it's looking really good for these films, and I'm excited to see what comes. I'll always show up for the next MCU movie. I always go opening weekend. I always watch it in a cinema. I'll not stop doing that. I was there day one with Iron Man, and I'll be there day one for all of these. And I know there's still a lot of people out there with a similar interest in these films, and I just hope they turn up to the cinemas a bit more, because the numbers are dropping. And if we want to continue to see these things happening, post Doomsday, with Robert Downey Jr. coming in as Doctor Doom, who knows how that's going to work. I know that's going to get people to show up, but you kind of, I think, want to see these movies beforehand, because I know the Thunderbolts, for example, are going to be a big part of that. So you're going to want to see this movie to understand these characters. Anyway, gonna take a little break now, and then I'll be back with some movie preview. So let's talk about some of the films that are hitting cinemas and streaming services between now and sort of September. There's loads of exciting movies, especially in theatre. Please go see films in the cinema. They are so great. It's such a great experience. Like, honestly, sitting there in the auditorium today when I saw Thunderbolts, It felt special. It didn't feel great that it was mostly empty. I think there was about 7 or 8 of us in there in the biggest screen in this multiplex. I didn't go at peak time, but it's still like, this is crazy. This is a Marvel movie on opening weekend, and it's basically an empty cinema. Doesn't give me a huge amount of confidence for the future of cinema. But anyway, I'm going to run down a list now of the movies that are on my watch list, like that I'm going to go to see in the cinema and will watch on streaming that week they come out. And if they're not already on your radar, I'd say check the trailers out in the links that I provide. I know some people don't like trailers. Matt, I'm calling you out there, Matt. Matt knows who he is, and hopefully I'll get him on this podcast soon to defend his stance on trailers. But let's talk about some of these movies. So first of all, this is in kind of chronological order of release. It's not in like release of or any order other than that. So The Surfer. The Surfer is the new Nick Cage movie. I don't even know who's directing this. All I know is I saw the trailer and went, this is Nick Cage at his most Nick Cagey. It's about the idea of a guy that takes his son back home to where he grew up, and he's been away a long time, has become kind of a bit of a successful businessman type. He doesn't fit in with the local crowd on the beach anymore, and the local crowd do not welcome him with open arms. They are very hostile. They don't think he belongs, and it's about this guy's descent into a Nick Cage madness while he deals with just wanting to be able to surf the beach he grew up on. It's crazy. It looks mad. It looks awesome. Check out the trailer. Next one I want to mention is Friendship. Now, it's another A24 joint, guys. These guys put out interesting films. And I would say that, you know, if you haven't seen their output, like, they're often strange, weird things, and this is the concept of... So it's Tim Robinson, by the way. So if you don't know Tim Robinson, he is one of the genius ex-alumni from Saturday Night Live who went on to do I Think You Should Leave on Netflix, which are some of the best, most awkward, cringy, uncomfortable sketches. They are so funny. I just rewatched them all again recently. Well worth checking out if you haven't checked those already. And it's him opposite Paul Rudd from Death of a Unicorn and Ant-Man and many other things. And it's about this guy that gets welcomed into a friendship group, and then sort of it doesn't quite work out, and it's like, it just gets super awkward and uncomfortable, and it looks like a movie version of one of the sketches from I Think You Should Leave. It's going to be dark, it's going to be funny, it could be shocking, there could be twists, I suspect. It looks like it's something that you should check out if you especially enjoy Tim Robinson's output up to this point. I love that stuff. I find his cringe humor just peak. Really, really good. Now I want to talk about the first of a few things that have a real nostalgic resonance for me. So the new Final Destination movie, Bloodlines, is coming out this summer. I mean, what am I going to do here? Give you the plot overview? Okay, the plot overview is there is a bloodline element here. So there is a group of people, in like they are in every Final Destination movie, that through some kind of compulsion avoids being killed, which obviously pisses off Death, and he's going to do his thing to creatively find ways of killing them throughout the course of the movie. Except twist, this happened in the 60s, and the current cast is all to do with their descendants. So it's obviously the amount of people that were saved have had kids, and they've had kids, etc. And that's now created a quite large group of people who should not be alive based on Death's design. So we can only imagine Death is going to find some very, very fun ways to kill these people. I cannot wait. I find these movies so much fun. So much fun. Originally created by the same guy, by the way, that created the American Pie series. Who knew? I found that out only recently. But that might be why I love them. There is a fun, playful, sort of dark, sarcastic, ironic tone to these movies that's just super compelling and speaks to me. So I will be checking that one out as soon as it comes out. Now, the next one, which is kind of a nostalgia thing, but also I have been following these movies since the very beginning, and I go and see them in the cinema every time they come out. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. Now, I didn't love Dead Reckoning, which was the previous Mission Impossible movie, purely because it suffered from the thing a few films suffered around that time period, like Fast and Furious number 10, which it didn't have a proper conclusion, because the story kind of blossomed out beyond the original concept for the film, because of Tom Cruise and Ralph McQuarrie, they got to do a part 2, like they didn't finish the story in Fast X. However, that meant that Dead Reckoning didn't have the most satisfying conclusion. It has some incredible set pieces, some brilliant Tom Cruise doing his best performances as Ethan Hunt. However, and a great turn from Hayley Atwell in there as well, and lots of other supporting cast that definitely deserved that recognition, but it didn't land. Now, this film, it was originally going to be Dead Reckoning Part 2, but they've renamed it The Final Reckoning, because they want to bring a sort of a sense of conclusion to the Tom Cruise Ethan Hunt storyline. Now, they've said in interviews that this isn't necessarily the last time Tom Cruise is going to be in a Mission Impossible movie, but they're going to take a break. They're going to maybe do some other things together, these creators, but they're going to take a step away from the Mission universe and give us a conclusion and a culmination to everything Ethan Hunt has been through since the first Mission Impossible movie. Now, that excites me. The idea that we're going to have threads and connections, and this was in the previous movie, but really apparently in this movie, that go all the way back to the first one. It's one of my favorite franchises, one of my favorite IPs. I love the Mission Impossible movies. The stunts and the cinematography always take it to the next level. You can never fault Tom Cruise's commitment to this role, to his performance. He takes risks. He puts himself out there. He's obviously the executive producer on these films. He's heavily involved with the creation of them as well as starring in them. And he just embodies this character. So I saw the trailer again today in the cinema. It's the first time I'd seen it in the cinema. And that on a big screen, the music, the action, the edit. Oh, I was so hyped. My skin was tingling. I cannot wait to see this movie. Next one on my list, this is a streaming premiere. This isn't in theatres. This is Fountain of Youth. Now, I saw the trailer for this a few weeks ago, and this is in the vein of like a National Treasure style romp, an action-adventure movie starring John Krasinski and Natalie Portman about the quest for the Fountain of Youth. So that's why I got that National Treasure vibe, but sorry, John, you're not Nicolas Cage, but you're a lot of fun. So I do wonder if that lack of Nicolas Cage is going to help or hinder this movie, because let's be real, whenever you see that guy in something, he always takes it to a level you don't expect, or to a place you don't expect. John, on the other hand, he's a solid actor. He gives good performances. He's always enjoyable to watch. He's charismatic and good looking, but is he going to keep me interested? This is going to be on Apple, I believe, but it looks like a lot of fun. It looks like it's going to be one of those movies we don't see a lot of nowadays, movies that were prevalent in the 90s and the early 2000s. So I'm up for seeing Fountain of Youth just because it will be fun. I'm sure my wife will enjoy watching it as well. That'll be one we put on, watch it while we have some dinner one night on a Friday night or something when that comes out. That'll be a fun one. The next movie, Deep Cover, is again one of those kind of slightly more accessible, fun, comedic action movies. This one is starring Bryce Dallas Howard and Orlando Bloom, and the concept here is that they're a group of improv actors, and they get sort of recruited by Sean Bean's policemen to crack into a crime ring and go undercover. So hijinks are going to ensue. It's going to be funny. Bryce Dallas Howard, I think, is actually a really good comedic actor. I actually really enjoyed it opposite Sam Rockwell in Argyle. That movie got absolutely destroyed by critics, but I thought it was a perfectly frothy, enjoyable, silly action-adventure movie once again. And there is space for these films. When you go and see cinema or go to the movies, it doesn't always have to be next level, art, cinema storytelling at its peak, Oscar worthy. It just needs to be fun. It just needs to be a nice time to, and a nice way to spend 2 hours. And I think Deep Cover looks like it's going to do that. Been a while since I've seen Orlando Bloom in anything. And the idea of these sort of slightly pretentious improv actors, especially Orlando Bloom's character, if you look in the trailer, trying to be hard and pretend to be criminals, just looks like it's going to be a really silly time. Also, I will add, Nick Mohammed is in this. Now, Nick Mohammed, you might know from Ted Lasso, and he's very, very, very funny in that as well. And obviously actually has a really good character development in that show, so he's got range, and I think he'll maybe be the surprise hit of this movie. So that's going to be a streaming one as well. Can't remember what service it's on, but it will be out there this summer. Next up, we have a big release in a franchise that has been long dormant, but it's bringing back together the creative talents of Danny Boyle and Alex Garland for the first time in a long, long time, and that is 28 years later. This is the franchise of films, if you can call it that, because this is only the third one, which basically restarted the zombie genre. They're not technically zombies in 28 universe. They are these infected sort of biohazard type creatures that, like rabies. I believe it was a mutated form of rabies, if I remember correctly. But it restarted the zombie genre, and definitely came out of that time, that first one, where I was loving zombie movies. I still love a zombie movie. I love a good horror movie, and especially like zombies. So I'm really excited to see where we can take the 28 days, 28 weeks, and now 28 years later universe. Now, they've said that off the back of this, there are going to be other films, not made by these guys, but in this universe, exploring other elements of it that are going to be done very much in the vein of that particular creator and director. They're going to give them a lot of freedom to look into the universe more. And I think zombies have this interestingly sort of enduring popularity where, Walking Dead is a great example of the genre. I went back and I recently watched my favorites, obviously the classic Romero ones, Night of the Living Dead and Day of the Dead, and there's something about it, right? There's something about how it gives us a window into being able to explore our own humanity and our own evil in the face of this oppressive threat that is so beyond our understanding. There's a lot of stories you can tell. So I'd be very curious to see, 28 years later, obviously we're talking about this virus having existed all of that time. What's society looking like at that point? And the trailer certainly seems to indicate we're going to dive deeper into a world that has been like this now for nearly 30 years. And that intrigues me. Are we going to see Cillian Murphy back in some kind of capacity? He's obviously a huge star now. It basically was the project that broke him out, that nobody knew who that was before 28 days later. So I'm really curious to see what this is. I will be going to see it in the cinema. I'm excited to see it. The trailer looks brilliant, and I love those two, Danny Boyle and Alex Garland, who obviously themselves have gone on to make incredible movies, won lots of awards, TV shows as well. Really great output from both of them. So gonna be a good one. Next one, I'm hyped for a couple of reasons. First of all, it is directed by Joseph Kosinski, an incredible director of action and exciting visuals, from Tron Legacy through to Top Gun Maverick and a few others as well. He's got a way of shooting kinetic action that is just pulls you in to the scene and makes it feel like you're there. Partner him up with Brad Pitt and then give him the subject matter of Formula One. I am also it's my number one sport that I follow, Formula One fan. I love it. So to see him directing Brad Pitt, full of drama and excitement as they try to come together with a younger driver to sort of restart a big Formula One team and compete with the likes of Mercedes and the Red Bulls and the Ferraris on the grid and deal with the personal aspects of a life in that world as well. I'm really excited to see what this movie is, but let's be real, I just can't wait to see the photography of the sport and of the cars going at 200 miles an hour on the biggest screen I can possibly get myself to. I think I'm going to have to see this one in IMAX. I really want to see that on the biggest screen possible. So I am pumped to see what that movie's going to turn out like. Formula One is now more popular than it's ever been due to things like Netflix Drive to Survive show. The sport has been made as accessible it's ever been as well. It definitely doesn't feel like that sport that was only really for rich people anymore. And I think that's brilliant and really cool. But, what is the story of this film going to be? There's going to need to be more than just car action, right? We need to have some drama and character that pulls us in, and I'm excited to see what they do with that as well. Next up is Jurassic World Rebirth. Now, let's be real, the last few Jurassic films have not been amazing, to the point where I've pretty much forgotten their existences, to be honest. Yes, getting back Sam Neill and Laura Dern for the third act in the Jurassic World kind of trilogy was a smart move, but the one in the middle, God, what was it even called? That was a bad film. But something about the Jurassic Park series, Jurassic Park franchise, I'll always come back to check that out. I mean, that first Jurassic Park and even the second one, Lost World, both directed by Steven Spielberg, are a couple of the best action, fun, family movies you're ever going to see. And dinosaurs, beautiful, incredible, monstrous dinosaurs on the screen. And this one is meant to have gotten us back a bit to the ground level. It's going to be a bit grittier. It was shot basically in secret, and it's starring, interestingly enough, Scarlett Johansson, she turns out is a big fan of the Jurassic Park series and has long been looking for a way into the franchise. So when the project turned up, she snapped it up straight away. So that gives me hopes that what we're going to see here is something a bit more akin to the Park series and a little bit less like especially the end of the Jurassic World series, which had such promise as a concept, but then I don't know, it fell down. Again, Bryce Dallas Howard, I really like her. She was good in those movies, but man, Chris Pratt, other than as Star-Lord, that guy's not good. But anyway, we won't talk about that and dwell on that. The next film, I only just saw a trailer for recently. I think it's a streaming movie. I think it's called Heads of State, and it stars Idris Elba and John Cena. Idris Elba is playing the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and John Cena is playing the President of the United States, and they team up to fight terrorists. I mean, check out this trailer. It looks ridiculous. It looks insane. It looks potentially like the stupidest thing ever made. But John Cena has got some really good comedic chops. He's really good at comedic timing and good action, obviously, as well, because of his physicality. And Idris Elba is a legend, right? We all love Idris Elba. His output is infinitely watchable. So this might be worth checking out. It's a little way out yet, and I'll be keeping my ear to the ground around the buzz about it. But I'm hoping it's going to turn out to be something fun to watch. Then, back in the theatre, big release for the summer, Superman. Can James Gunn save the DC movie universe? It can't get any worse after the complete collapse of it a few years ago. And everything about this trailer does excite me. Now, I'm not the world's biggest Superman fan. I've always been more of a Marvel guy than a DC guy. But when Superman is done well, and you kind of really get to the core of the character and what it means, then it can be brilliant. And it looks to me like this movie is taking heavy inspirations from the Silver Age of comics. So you've got some certain particular Green Lanterns in there, not the Hal Jordans you might expect, but the Guy Gardners. You've got Hawk Girl in there. You've got Mr. Terrific in there. You've obviously got Lex Luthor and Lois Lane and his usual supporting characters. But it looks to me like we've got kaiju and monsters, and that was very usual in the Silver Age, where it was more about Superman facing monstrous extraterrestrial or terrestrial threats rather than, say, super villains in a more classic sense. But I can't wait to see how it all comes together. I think what they've shown so far, it feels like they're showing us quite a bit, but I think that James Gunn is keeping a lot of the thrust of this movie under wraps, and I think there's going to be some big surprises in there. I'm really looking forward to seeing what this is going to look like, a proper James Gunn DC Universe spinning off of Superman. I know he's also cast Jason Momoa now as Lobo. I think they're looking at what to do with Wonder Woman going forwards and a few other projects, but I'm cautiously optimistic. The trailer definitely makes me connect with emotionally more to Christopher Reeve's Superman, which is obviously a seminal cinema, than it does Snyder's stuff. But look, I think Henry Cavill's Superman was brilliant casting. I thought that was spot on. He got done dirty by the movies he was in. It wasn't his fault. So it's a real shame to see us lose Henry Cavill's Superman. But I'll give this new guy a chance. I'm always excited to see what they do with him. I think Superman as a bastion of truth, justice, and the American way is what it can be at its best. And I think hope and optimism is what we need in this world right now. So let's see what we can do with some new Superman. Cautiously optimistic. Next up, back to more superheroes. I talked about it earlier on off the back of the Thunderbolts review. Fantastic Four, First Steps. Everything about this trailer has me excited. The setting, the casting, it looks perfect. The costumes, the art design, the way it's shot, the focus on family, the focus on responsibility, the focus on Reed being smart and the Thing being strong and Johnny being Johnny, right? It's going to be brilliant. I have absolute complete confidence in this movie because let's be honest, Pedro Pascal, Vanessa Kirby, this is such great casting. It can't go wrong, can it? It can't. Tell me it can't. I am so excited. I can't wait to see Galactus done properly as a big tall guy in purples. There's Silver Surfers in there, and then somehow at the end of this, they're gonna end up in the MCU. It's gonna be next level. It's coming soon. If I could book my tickets right now, I would. And then we've got kind of like a sequel nobody asked for, but at the same time, when I heard about it, I kind of did a little jump for joy because it is such a great comedy. Happy Gilmore 2. Happy Gilmore, perhaps the best golf movie ever made because it's not really about golf, is very, 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 very funny. Perhaps showing its age a little now. It's got some dated sort of concept. To be honest, it's got a dated concept that in the trailer for Happy Gilmore 2 and his happy place, he actually sort of overtly jokes about how it needs to be more suitable to today's day and age. And that made me laugh. It's a very knowing kind of reference to today's sensibilities. But the cast is all back. I don't know why. I don't know why they're making this movie other than, I guess, there was a desire to make more money. But if it's funny, I'm showing up. Simple as that. And then talks of sequels and remakes that, again, you're like scratching your head as to why they exist. We've got a new Naked Gun movie called The Naked Gun, starring Liam Neeson. You got to see this trailer. It's bonkers. It's the weirdest thing you've ever seen. But what really excites me, weirdly, is that it's directed by Akiva Schaffer. Now, you're probably like, who the hell is Akiva Schaffer? He's one of the 3 guys behind The Lonely Island, which is possibly the best thing that's ever come out of Saturday Night Live. And yes, I am including the cast of Dan Aykroyd's, the Eddie Murphys in that. Honestly, The Lonely Island hit so big in SNL, the era I was watching it religiously. I listened to the podcast that they do every week. I love those guys so much. I've watched their stuff on YouTube so many times. I remember watching it on SNL. So when I heard that Akiva Schaffer was the one directing this, I'm like, this is the guy that also directed the MacGruber movie, which is fantastic, and has also had, obviously, done a lot of directing of their shorts and worked closely with Andy Samberg. And it's just, that gives me so much faith that this movie is going to make me cry laughing. And the trailer looks brilliantly funny and weird and knowing and everything you'd want from that. Leslie Nielsen's Naked Gun, Frank Drebin, perfect. I love those films. They are perfect spoof of the crime action movie of that era. I am just praying and hoping that Liam Neeson can do the same for the 2025s. Please be good. Please be good. Please be good. Final movie. Trailer just landed. It's called Weapons, and I want to put this on people's radar because I think the director of this, Zach Cregger, also created a bit of a surprise hit from a year or so ago called Barbarian. Now, I'm a big, like I said, I love my horror movies. I love especially genre tinged horror movies, which is what this seems to be. The premise bit is a whole classroom of kids in the middle of the night one night, when they're at home, all gets out of their beds and disappears. Why? So there's a mystery, there's creepy imagery, there's going to be twists, there's going to be turns. It looks very unsettling and very weird. I'm there for Weapons. It's got a great marketing campaign already. I can't wait to see what happens next with that movie. I can't wait to see it. That's at the end of the summer. It'll be a nice palate cleanser. While the days start to get cooler again and get us ready for Halloween time and Christmas. So yeah, it's going to be a busy summer for films. There's loads of great stuff. I hope I've put some stuff on your radar and built your hype a little bit as we've gone through them all there. And at the very least, check out some of these trailers if it doesn't upset you at the mere idea of doing that. Matt, okay. Back soon with some TV. So what with my in-depth review, especially of Thunderbolts, where I talked for quite a while, and then we just done that summer preview, I'll make this quite brief. But basically, I finally got around to finishing off Cobra Kai. And Cobra Kai has its ups and downs, and I can understand why people felt like you maybe weren't getting anything particularly new from it. And I sort of feel like most of the seasons when they started in that first few episodes feel much like a reset and a retread of what came before. But and the final season did exactly the same thing. I started watching it and then I kind of fell away, and I only finally pushed through to the end in the last couple of weeks. And basically, once it gets going and once it really builds up steam, it grabs you again, and it just triggers the nostalgia so hard. Like, I grew up on the Karate Kid movies. Like, the story of Johnny and the story of just those guys and what they go through in Mr. Miyagi is just so brilliant and so of that era. What they did with Cobra Kai, how Ralph Macchio and William Zabka were able to come back and tell this like very grounded story set now about where these people would be in their lives, and watching Johnny's character develop across all of these seasons of Cobra Kai until he becomes this better person at the end. It is schmaltzy. It's very soap opera-y. But did I still shed a tear or two at the end? Absolutely. Because and obviously you've got the adult characters, you've got the kid characters as well, and the journeys they all go on. And there's such a positive message. And the karate in this final season, the action is done so well, and the stakes have never been higher. Like, honestly, if you fell off Cobra Kai at any point, I would strongly say it's worth going back to. Now, obviously, your mileage will vary. If you're as old as I am and you have that direct connection to those original Karate Kid movies, I think it carries a lot more weight. But if, you're a younger viewer and you're just enjoying it for the modern set, I'd say go back and watch those movies and you'll understand why so much more matters here in this series of TV. I love it. I'm sad it's gone, but it did have pretty much the perfect ending. The epilogue for all the characters, everything is tied up so well, which makes it really weird to me that there is a Karate Kid movie that is going to be in the cinemas this summer that has got Ralph Macchio back playing. How's that going to... I don't have the answers. I don't know how that is going to work in a world where Cobra Kai exists. I hope it's good. God, I hope it's good, but... I feel it's unnecessary, but why would he not say yes to coming back to do that movie after the back of the success of Cobra Kai? I cannot fault Ralph Macchio for doing that. Fair play to him, but I'm a bit dubious. Like, I'm actually very, very dubious to see what's in that movie, but we'll see. That's why it wasn't on my summer watch list, because I'm gonna wait to hear things about that before I go and see it. Finally, in TV, I know we're not doing a lot of TV this week, but there will be a lot more coming. But basically, I wanted to touch on the second tranche of episodes from Andor. Oh my God, this show is incredible. Like, it's so good. I love that they're dropping multiple episodes, 3 episodes every week. So we get this year of Andor all at once, this moment in time within that year. We're now 3 years, I think, before the Battle of Yavin. So we're seeing this development of these characters, of the plan goes forward, of the implications of what's going on. Oh man, it's such a different type of Star Wars. It's so challenging. It's so adult and mature and interesting, and the performances are fantastic and the writing is fantastic. I think I slightly preferred the first 3 episodes to the second 3 episodes, but only just. I am absolutely hooked. I watched them the day they land on a Wednesday. I'm going to do it again this week. I'm sure I'll touch on them again next week as well. I won't go into any spoilers, which is almost pointless talking about, but man, if you're not watching Andor, watch some Andor, for the love of God. So good. So now let's move on to some chat around games. And it's nothing good. It's nothing good, guys. I mean, it has been a tough week in the games universe. I've not actually had a chance to play a single video game really this week, if I'm honest with you. And the news that's been coming out hasn't exactly made me want to play that many games. I think I'll touch on it first of all. Let's talk a little bit about the craziness of Xbox increasing pricing. Like, what is going on? So there's this whole economic impact of Trump's amazing tariffs, and that's kind of what started the ball rolling in this. And I believe it's all connected, but you could argue that it's not, and I'm not some kind of master economist or anything like that, but so that news came out. Then we got the Switch 2 news and the announcements of the pricing and how that's been affected by the tariffs and is still potentially going to be affected even more. But it's almost like it's opened the door to the other players in this space, being Xbox and PlayStation, to do crazy things with their prices. Now, Xbox, just to be clear, these are consoles that have been on the market for like 4 or 5 years, right? So they've increased the prices in quite a big way. So they've increased the lowest end like Xbox Series S in the UK by like 50 quid up to £300. At this point in the console cycle, the hardware should be dropping in price, not increasing in price. It doesn't make a jot of sense unless you consider Xbox's current strategy, which is we've lost the hardware race. We've given up. We are pivoting into a Game Pass world where we just want to put Game Pass onto everyone's platform, and we're actually now even beyond that. We're just releasing our games now on every platform. Forza just came out on PlayStation, right? All the Xbox games now come out day and date basically on PC as well. So they're beyond that. They're now putting games on their competitors' hardware natively. I mean, it is a crazy world we live in. I wouldn't have predicted this 4 years ago, for example. At the start of this generation, I would never have predicted that we would have seen Xbox published games on a PlayStation. But that's where we're at. So that to me speaks to the idea that Xbox is almost like, if they hadn't doubled down on what they'd said already around messaging around hardware, it would be feeling like they were going to do a Sega and get out completely from the hardware space and just give up and just turn into a games publisher completely, not make hardware anymore. And would I say that was the worst move for them at this point? No. I probably wouldn't. The only reason I would be against that is what we don't want to get into a situation of is a monopoly. We don't want Sony to become the only player in town when it comes to the high-spec consoles, right? Because if we do that, then they can put the prices up even higher and higher and higher because there'll be nobody to compete with them. We want competition because competition drives sort of a fairer level playing field for consumers, right? So Xbox has said, though, they aren't jumping out of the hardware market. There will be a new generation of hardware, and they're also working on a handheld. So some of these decisions are just baffling. Like the fact that the Series X, their flagship console, has also gone up in price. Everything has gone up in price. And there's talk that by the end of this year, a new Xbox game will be £80. It only recently went up with this generation to 70, so we're going up to £80 now for a new game. Now, it's not the first time video games have been this expensive. Video games, I remember Super Nintendo games being £80 way back when that hardware was on the shelves. However, we're in a place where cost of living is super high, inflation is still really high, just surviving day to day. So, the fact that these luxury items are getting so expensive means that people are less and less likely to buy them. So it's going to be this situation that what's going to happen to this industry? It's absolutely mind-blowing. I'm kind of baffled. I'm intrigued to see how it shakes out. Obviously, Nintendo has also said that their new games are going to be around the £80 mark in the UK as well when that comes out, when they start coming out for the Nintendo Switch 2 this summer. Xbox is just going to line up with that, right? Because you don't want to look like you're selling games at a lower price, because it's the perception then that you're selling an inferior product. So it's not just about the reality of these costs, but it's a market perception issue as well. There's a lot of stuff going on here. We've got crazy economic situations with tariffs going on with China. That's where a lot of this hardware is manufactured, for example, and video games consoles are not exempt from anything like that. Certain, telecom communication devices like phones and certain PC things and stuff of that nature are exempt from the tariffs. Game consoles are not. So they are going to see these huge increases in costs for production and shipping of those goods into the US, which is the number one market for them. So therefore, it's going to drive the prices up across the globe. Thank you so much, Donald Trump. I am literally going to blame that guy for this. Frankly, if I could, I'd probably blame him for everything. It's a really crazy time. It's a really strange say. I'm glad I own my hardware already. I certainly wouldn't want to be going out and buying a Series X or S now. With the cost of things as they are, it's going to get harder and harder to justify. And also the fact that they're putting their games out on PlayStation and PC, why would you buy one? Like, why would you buy one? Right now, I wouldn't tell it. Nobody should buy an Xbox right now. Straight up. Don't waste your money. Can't believe I'm saying that. Sad times. Okay, let's move on to the other sad, crazy gaming news from the week. The decimation of the traditional video game journalistic outlet. At my peak, I was pretty close to being able to call myself someone that worked in video game journalism. So back in the late 2000s through the early 2010s, I guess in a combination of websites and video outputs and podcasts, if I'd wanted to move into that world professionally, I reckon I could have had a good chance of going freelance or ending up working at one of these outlets. But even then, I looked at that future and I saw such instability in those places that I was not interested in making that pivot and taking that chance. I loved my chances I got to go to places like Gamescom as a video game journalist and cover that. It was an incredible thing as a hobbyist, and I'm really glad to have done it. And it kills me in a way to see this inevitable demise of these outlets. So the news this week that Polygon has been sold to Valnet and has been hit with mass layoffs and basically decimated in terms of their editorial content. Polygon, which was created to be this bastion of sort of free speech in the video game area so that they would always be honest and call people out and call publishers and developers out for the wrongdoing that they did. They've been through a few changes since that original launch. It's been a rocky one and it's ended in the way I'd expect. So Valnet, famously known for kind of click farming attitudes, really sketchy background to that whole company, to the creator behind it. They're just out there to make money and to drive content, and it's all going to be AI driven before long. So unsurprisingly, they're going to just basically gut Polygon and turn it into a click farm. Shock. Don't bother going to that website anymore. It's done. And then coupled with that, my probably number one favorite video game website, I've kind of drifted away from all of them because of a lot of this stuff over the recent years, and I now follow specific creators and support them through Patreon, and I listen on their YouTube channel. I follow them on YouTube, and I have Patreon podcasts and things like that. That's how I support them. But Fandom, who acquired Giant Bomb a little under a year ago, I believe, has now kind of done the same thing to them as what's happened to Polygon. So Fandom is a kind of a group of websites which are based on wikis, right? So user editable content, and they go around and they acquire all of these wikis and then they just fill them again with slop and adverts and unskippable videos to try and drive revenue and just turn them into shit shows. It was a surprising acquisition when they picked up Giant Bomb, because it's like, well, what are they going to do with them? The hope was they were going to try and develop themselves and give themselves sort of an editorial arm. And that's certainly what we were all being optimistically thinking might happen from Giant Bomb. And Giant Bomb's been through so many changes since the Whiskey Media days, founded by Jeff Gersman off the back of his departure, back of his firing from GameSpot. They ended up getting reacquired by GameSpot and stuff like that. And that was actually, turns out, a better time than it was where they've been here under Fandom. Fandom has let go of they've been confirmed departures of a couple of their editors, and it's looking like at least half of the team is gone, and there's basically no content coming out from that site right now while they try to evaluate what the hell they're going to do next. It's just heartbreaking. I mean, what does it leave us with? We've got Kotaku out there, though again, that's not what it was. We've got an IGN out there, which has been scaled back massively, and IGN has always been in a weird place where it's tried to massively diversify its content. Obviously, there's always been a lot of controversy around what their outputs consists of, the validity of it, how much can you trust them. I actually would defend them. I think they've always been a good group of people doing their best in tricky circumstances, and they've certainly endured. And then there's the GameSpot as well, and the Eurogamers, right? And I go to Eurogamer for that technical analysis. I really like the Digital Foundry element of that. But yeah, video game journalism, where we talk about, we're not just talking about somebody writing a guide. We're not just talking about somebody doing a review. We're talking about people investigating practices and developers, investigating and reporting on layoffs and reporting on things that aren't always the best news in the gaming universe. What's going to happen to that? Nothing, I suspect. I think it's pretty much done. There is amazing creators on YouTube that cover video games, such as NoClip, which I support via their Patreon. But when it comes to actually the ins and outs of the industry and what's happening in that space, I mean, there are people like Jason Schreier on Bloomberg, but you have to get past that paywall to see that, right? So that open and honest conversation, where's that going to come from going forwards? I don't know. I think I'm glad I'm not in that space as a professional. My heart goes out to those hardworking those creators on Polygon, those editors, those journalists, and really goes out to the guys on Giant Bomb who, because of their regular streams and podcasts, you do develop that parasocial kind of relationship where you feel like you get to know them, even though, you know, they've probably got a persona and they're only sharing what they're sharing. They're not your friend, but you do feel like you have a personal connection with them. And, you know, I feel really bad for those people, the Jeff Grubbs and the Mike Minites and those guys. So good luck to them. I know they'll find something in the future. I suspect it will be Patreon supported content created by themselves off of their own backs and not in connection with these streams. But who knows what's going to happen. It's a weird place. The industry is in turmoil in so many ways, with layoffs across the industries in developers and publishers. EA just announced more layoffs. You know, another Apex Legend game has been cancelled. You know, so there's just, the money is disappearing from the area, from the market. And I think we're seeing a huge restructure and reshuffle of how video games are produced, developed, published, covered, you name it, and purchased for that matter. Just talking about the prices going up. Everything's a subscription now. It's a very different world to when I first started looking at this 20 years ago. Well, guys, that is another episode of 8 Dead Giants. I hope you've enjoyed this one. I was solo again. I know we ended on a bit of a downer there, but sometimes, you know, the things we're going to talk about are not always positive, and we have to be realistic about that. I hope to play a few more games in this coming week, so we can have a chat about that. I'd have to check I've been a bit away from games. I'm enjoying movies and TV a bit more at the minute, you know, and I'm not going to force myself to play games when I'm not feeling it. So I'm enjoying those sort of mediums at the moment a little bit more. Didn't talk about any books today, didn't talk about any comics today or sport or anything like that, so maybe I'll bring a bit more of that in next week as well. Again, hoping for a co-host. Just got to make those times line up. Got to make those dates line up. But honestly, I'd love to have someone to chat with me on this as well and challenge me. Otherwise, it's just me talking to you like this. Leave me comments. Leave me feedback. I know I had a few of those on the last video. I hope to have a few more this time. But thanks again for tuning in and listening to another episode of 8 Dead Giants. I'm on all the socials. Not done a lot there yet. I will probably look to get this podcast up into Spotify's and to iTunes and all that stuff soon as well. So keep an eye out on those platforms for more 8 Dead Giants. Until then,